Joining us now is State Department spokesperson Tommy Pigott. Tommy, thanks. Listen, you heard those comments from Democrats. They want to, I guess, limit President Trump's ability to negotiate, to move forward with any type of help. They really are putting him in a damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? He isn't doing enough. He's doing too much when it comes to things like this. One thing I want to ask you, being there at the State Department, what's the sentiment from other Arab nations? I know there's kind of the public thing they put out, but we've heard for years that they don't want Iran as this kind of bad actor in the region. Would there be at least quiet support if President Trump moved further?
Look, I'm not going to get into sensitive diplomatic conversations, but what I can say, and I think the context of this is really important, is that you have a regime in Iran that has wasted that country's wealth on a nuclear weapons program that was obliterated by President Trump, on malign activities, on their proxies throughout the region, their terrorist proxies, instead of focusing on the basic needs of their people, water, food, and energy. So what we've seen in Iran is the justifiable anger of the Iranian people who need water, food, and energy. So the Iranian regime should end its malign activities. The president's been very clear on that. He's taken action in that regard.
Tommy, it's a fellow Tommy here. So we've got a Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, meeting with President Trump, of course, this past week. The future of the country obviously still hanging in the balance. And while she praised President Trump's effort to remove Nicolas Maduro, she is calling out the current leader of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, who was once reportedly a DEA target. Listen to this.
From an ideological perspective, I mean, she's a communist, and she has been part of all these criminal structure that has put in place not only to destroy Venezuela, but to harm the rest of the hemisphere, including the United States. She's absolutely someone that's close, as I have to say, to Russia, to Iran, to China. That's where her loyalty is.
So, Tommy, why is the Trump administration working with the former Maduro regime, and will the White House reconsider possibly supporting Machado as the next leader of Venezuela?
Well, look, as the president and secretary have laid out, we're focused on our national interests here. You had an illegitimate leader in Maduro that cooperated with narco-terrorists, that unleashed gang members into our country, that had a corrupt system of oil where the oil wasn't being used to benefit the people of Venezuela. We're clearly focused on our national interests there to combat the flow of deadly drugs into our country, to make sure we don't have gang members coming into our country, to make sure that the oil is used in a way that benefits the people of Venezuela and the people of the United States. We've seen an agreement to that regard. So we've had discussions with the interim authorities there. Those discussions have been constructive, as the president has indicated. But the secretary has also outlined a three-phased approach here. We're going to see the stability of Venezuela, then what might be called the recovery, and then the transition into a longer-term situation there in Venezuela. But the guiding principle here is always our national interests. And you can also see that with our actions throughout the entire region, designating cartels as they are, the narco-terrorists that they are, and also working with countries across the region to make sure we're stopping the flow of those deadly drugs into our country.
Tommy, it's Alicia Acuna here. As you know, protests broke out in Denmark yesterday over the U.S. desire to acquire Greenland. This comes as President Trump threatens 8 European nations with tariffs until a deal is reached for the island territory, saying it is imperative for United States national security. Tommy, Denmark's own foreign minister admitted to Bret Baier that China has its sights set on the region. What is the administration's response to this?
Well, the Arctic is essential to the security of the United States. The president has laid out the very compelling reasons as to why. The security of the Arctic, the fact that we're building this golden dome where Greenland would be such an important part of that acquiring Greenland is essential to accomplishing those goals. So the president has outlined a clear goal. He's using tools at his disposal to see that goal be accomplished. But make no mistake, Greenland is essential to the security of the United States. The president has stated that clearly. And as always, he is taking actions to put America first. And as always, he's identifying problems before they become problems, in the sense that he wants to prevent them from being problems. So people can criticize the president, but he has been proven right again and again and again on these issues, usually far ahead of his critics. And then a few years later, his critics realized that he was right.
Tommy, David here. This will be our shortest conversation ever. The State Department will stop processing immigrant visas from 75 countries over concerns that migrants from these countries take welfare at unacceptable rates, saying that the freeze will remain in effect until they can make sure new migrants won't abuse our welfare system. So How effective do you think this initiative will be?
Well, it's incredibly important. I think if the American people knew that people were coming to our country and expecting the American taxpayer to foot the bill, they'd be shocked. So we're taking clear action here to make sure that doesn't happen. We're ending the abuse of our immigration system. We're making sure that people do not rely on benefits, especially cash assistance, when they come here. So that pause is essential to make sure that we have the standards in place to fully implement this policy. And this is also in the context of a series of actions when it comes to visa to make sure that we are living up to our responsibility that each visa decision is a national security decision. And fundamentally, visa security is border security. Of course, we think of the border when we think of border security, but who we are letting into our country is so important. That's why you see the revocations of those on visas that have broken our laws here. That's why you see increased vetting standards. That's why you see us looking at social media where people live so much of their time, so much of their life now online. So we're taking clear action to make sure our country is secure, and visa security is a key part of that.
All right, Tommy Pigott, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for providing your insight.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Tommy.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.